Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's Life Conversations with a Twist. I'm coming at you on a Friday afternoon, well, in my time, well, your time too, with Laura. Laura is a financial advisor, and her and I happened to meet I think it was last week.
Yeah.
Yeah, it happened so quickly. And I love your story. I love the work that you're doing. And I was like, you have to be on my podcast. And so, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Heather. I'm so excited to be here.
I love this is like one of the reasons why I love a lot of reasons for my podcast, but I have been connected to women all over the world. You're coming from us in New York,
Yes.
and I just feel instantly connected to women who are doing good work, who are leaning into their dreams, who are going through hard times and coming out and doing good work to inspire others. And so I'm so honored to have you here today.
Yeah, I'm excited to see where our conversation takes us.
That's going to be great. Okay, so tell the listeners a little bit about who you are, what you do, where you live, and then we're just going to dive in and we're going to talk from beginning to end of your career.
Okay. So my name is Laura Rotter. I'm founder of a financial life planning firm. The name is True Abundance Advisors. I also have a podcast, Making Change with Your Money, where I interview women who've been through a big life change, similar to what I went through, and live to come out the other side and tell their stories. Um, my life change was I had quite a long career on the institutional side of Wall Street, which means that I worked for investment groups who were investing monies of large companies or wealthy families or university endowments. Um, I had a specific focus on a small part of the market, which is called distressed debt investing, which is bonds of companies that were going through financial challenges. And I often look back at their career in like thirds. So the first third of my career, Heather, I loved it, right? I was one of those nerds in high school that realized I could find interesting work and make a lot of money doing
Well,
it.
I was going to ask you, like, how do you, I mean, obviously, like, I feel like in the financial world, you're like a numbers person, right? But like, what made you want to go down that path?
I think, like many people, and now I find it fascinating to talk to my clients and others about money stories. I grew up in a family, I mean, we were not at all poor, but we were not financially secure. My father was someone who went from career to career. I mean, the message I ended up taking in was that it's important to find out what makes you happy. But I grew up with financial insecurity. When my friends were in homes, we were in a rent control apartment. Um, and as I look back, it's not that I feel like I was so aware of it, but both myself and my sister ended up being the primary breadwinners of our family. So I think there was a message there that, like, we want to be able to take care of ourselves.
Hmm.
I also think it's interesting as I interview women that I didn't have brothers. So I think there's a way in which, we went to, it's sad to say I'm a New York Jets football fan, but, like we went with dad to the football games and we talked to dad about his career. So there wasn't a sense of like, girls are treated one way and boys are treated another way. I found that again with podcast guests that grew up without brothers, similarly might have gone into sciences or work. So again, gross generalization. But I think there was a way I wasn't aware of it, but it was important for me to earn money. I do remember. So we all look back on our career stories. I was actually an English literature major.
Oh.
Um, and I think to me, that was a way of, I loved reading books. And through reading books, you learn about history, you learn about politics, you learn the background. And I feel that that was sort of similar to what I ended up doing because I never focused on a specific industry in my work on Wall Street. I was what's called a generalist. So I might be looking at the payphone industry that obviously went through a lot of change, or the newspaper industry, or the steel industry. So I was always learning, stories. To me, investing at the end of the day was stories. What's going on with the companies? What's going on with the stories? So I was an English lit major, and I think my dad introduced me. I ended up like working first on the platform of a bank, like opening accounts for people. And there was space for someone to learn to be a credit analyst, which is, what do you look at to extend loans to companies? How do you decide what the right amount of loans? And I'm telling you this story because I do have a memory. They sort of interact with each other. One memory I had when I first met my husband, I said, if I could just earn 25,000 a year. And he said to me, you don't have much of an understanding of money, do you? On the other hand, I do remember working for the bank. It was a long time ago, so I think I was earning 17,000 or something. And if I became a senior credit person, I'd be earning 30,000. And I remember thinking, I want to earn more money. I want to earn six figures. And someone told me if you go to work on Wall Street, you can earn six figures. So I started to go for my MBA at night. The bank ultimately started to pay for my tuition. So I did 1 year full time. And it was in my head that like I wanted to earn six figures. And so that was sort of, I went from this credit analyst training program with a small middle market bank in New York to getting my MBA to getting my foot in the door in Oppenheimer Management Corp, working as an analyst on their high yield mutual fund. And, the rest is sort of history. But when I look back on, yeah, how I built my career. And I think, Heather, that you couldn't do it the same way nowadays. Like I remember, again, being a junior person and they asked me to look through resumes, and anyone who didn't go to like Harvard or you just threw the resumes out.
Yeah.
So, I think the way I built my career, which was quite a while ago, I would not be able to do today. It's gotten a lot more competitive.
So interesting. What was work? Okay, so before we jumped on, I was like, I'm not a huge financial stuff is very scary to me. I'm obviously learning more now that I have a family and I have businesses and I'm gaining more of that. But like the stock market, Wall Street, all of the investment stuff is very foreign to me. Can you tell us like a little bit about what Wall Street is and like what your experience was like working there?
Let's see how
I
I
know we
could.
don't have a lot of time, and I'm sure there's probably a lot of stories, but if you could sum it up.
So, I guess to explain it broadly, Wall Street is a lot of different things, right? Like when I meet someone at a party and they say, "Oh, you worked in finance," or he does too. And you're like, okay, that could mean a lot of things. Um, so Wall Street is a way that companies raise money. I mean, that's the first concept of Wall Street, of having a place where you can turn to if you want to sell a stake in your company, right? If you, Heather, wanted someone to invest in your company so that you had more capital to grow it. Now, you're a small company, so you might turn to your friends and family, but larger companies, as you might imagine, need to raise more money, so they'll turn to investment banks to turn to their customers to raise money. I guess that's a broad way of saying it. I worked in a
Mm.
specific part of the market, like I said, distressed debt investing. So I knew everyone, especially when I first started, was I don't know if this name would be familiar to you or even our listeners, but Michael Milken was very well known many, many years ago. He developed the high yield bond market. And so it was a relatively small niche when I started. So there was a certain amount of camaraderie. First of all, when you start, like anyone in a new job, everyone's your age and 20s and you're doing something exciting and you're going out for drinks after work. So I feel like I loved what I did when I first started, and it was interesting. And you could open the newspaper, and something you were doing research on was in the news. And I guess the one thing I want to say, if I look back at my career in investing, Heather, if you're someone who wants relatively instant gratification, you're right. I compare and contrast it. I was the primary breadwinner, not the primary caretaker of, I have three children. When you're a parent, there's no gratification. Maybe years from now, like, oh, I seem to have done an okay job, but like you're working, working, working to be with your kids, give them what they ask for, etc. And there's no real feedback short term. In it certainly wasn't what I did. It was what's known as event-driven investing. So I was always looking at like a catalyst where within the next like 6 to 9 months, a relatively short time frame, I anticipated things happening because I was investing in companies that were distressed. So maybe they'd file bankruptcy, maybe
Mm.
they would do something with their balance sheets. And so within a relatively short period of time, you'd be like, that was a good investment decision. We made good money, and you could measure it. At the end of the year, you could say, I've made the firm this much money. My bonus should be X. It was, so there was some, yeah, gratification from that job. It wasn't like investing and hoping within the next 3 to 5 years, the investment thesis would prove out. And I would say it's very different than what I do for my clients now. Besides the fact that my work is much broader than just investments, I'm also not taking a lot of risks for my clients. It's like we're going to keep fees low, we're going to be well diversified, and this is long-term money. This is money that you don't need for at least the next 5 years. So it's a very, very, very different head and different work than working on Wall Street was.
I have a random question because I'm in the events industry here where we live, and I see budgets from like little budgets to people who spend massive amount of monies on like one event, like a wedding or a corporate event where they're spending, millions of dollars on these events. And so I'm always in awe of being around these people where money just I just have a different perspective of it, right? Because I was like you, like I grew up, like we had things, but like nobody was going on these like fancy trips and spending all this money, on these extravagant things. What was it like being around people who just have so much money that they like don't even know what to do with
So I guess one thing I want to say, because I also have noticed this from my podcast guests, which is when I grew up, which I will respond to being on Wall Street, but when I grew up, there just wasn't the kind of wealth.
it?
I
Mm,
mean, we could talk about, and again, I'm older than you, obviously, Ronald Reagan and the tax law changes that just cause a massive amount of wealth disparity in our country. So, like when I grew up, my friends who had houses were in row houses.
yeah, yeah.
There wasn't massive, massive wealth. And I would say, and this has been a real learning, particularly as I work with individuals, by the end of my career on Wall Street, it was attracting people. Like I started to say, it was, I was a nerd in high school that then found intellectually interesting work that made money. By the end of my career, it was really dominated quite a lot by the frat boys in college that were leveraging their relationships. And I say it that way because Wall Street ended up attracting people on the margin that just wanted to make money. And I could analyze that, they weren't respected by their dad, so they're proving themselves, whatever it was. But so, I mean, I work with people that felt like they were working for the F dash CK money. Like that was what it was about, like amassing enough to. And and when you have that head, there's never enough, right? Because now you're collecting wine and you belong to the expensive country club and you have to take expensive vacations. And, I was a small piece of that with the 6,000 square foot home and the expensive vacations and the vacation home. And you get trapped by your things.
Mm.
And so I still remember a conversation with someone who, similarly felt trapped and also felt like we're not developing real skills, right? We're developing skills that work in this particular field, and they're not necessarily transferable
Mm.
to other fields or other endeavors. And I will say, looking now at people who I guess I was about to say I respect, but are similarly intellectually interested and not only driven by money. And they left Wall Street and wrote books or became teachers or became journalists or like myself started to, set up a firm to work with individuals, not to, I have an investment strategy, so I'm going to start a registered investment advisor and get people to give me money. But like, I want to help people. Like, I want to work with individuals that have fear. And so I would say that certainly in the last decade of my career, that question just brings up the feeling of like, I didn't like
Mm.
anyone. I did not like the people I work with. A lot of older men divorcing their wives, getting married to younger trophy wives. Even the ones who weren't getting divorced, they had like a wife at home with 4 kids, but they were going out drinking every night. It was like, I just didn't.
It's your stereotypical thing that you would see on a TV show or a movie.
Yes, like I
Yeah,
really did
yeah,
not respect them, did not respect
yeah.
their values. It got like hard and distasteful for me to work with them, to be quite honest. Again, I'm generalizing, not everyone, but that was my experience towards the end of my career.
So you were on Wall Street for, you said 10 years?
I'm sorry to say, I always have to start say I was 12. I was on Wall Street for close to 30 years.
You were, okay.
Yeah, so it was like 10 years that I loved it, 10 years that I had 3 young children. I was not the primary, but you might imagine when I came home, it was like, okay, now another whirlwind.
Yep.
Um, and then the last decade, when I finally could settle down, I realized like I'm miserable and I'm trapped.
So that I mean, I feel like this is your twist, right? This is like where you lived in your career, you were wealthy, you were traveling, you had this beautiful lifestyle. Was there a moment in time, like I always feel like there's either like a moment or a day that was just like where it like changed you of being like, I need to do something different, or I want to do something that's more, fulfilling. Or was it like a year? Like what was that moment for you that like set that into your next journey of your career?
So I guess I'll share a couple of little anecdotes. So I knew again, I feel like it was the last decade that I knew I was unhappy but I didn't think I could leave.
Mm.
Um, and I found a yoga teacher. Again, I'm a pretty type A personality. So when I first found yoga, it was through Bikram yoga,
Oh
140
yeah.
and I'm sweating and then my synagogue actually had a woman who was coming to teach yoga. And I still remember that I walked into the class and there's like all these women from my synagogue, so all different shapes and sizes. And I'm like, I'm not coming back. This is like, how am I going to break a sweat in this class? Like, I'm not gonna. And the teacher, if you know anything about yoga or if our listeners do, was playing kirtan music and actually used the word God, which is a very loaded word, but I had been a very spiritual kid growing up and married into a family that made me feel psychotic if I felt like there was anything beyond what we could touch and feel and see. Um, and that yoga teacher, like I kept coming to her classes, like broke my heart open. And I then took a yoga teacher training and got involved in an organization where I started to study meditation. And that was like the first like inkling that I'm not going to get a do-over. This is
Mhm.
my life. And if I'm just basically clawing my way to the weekends or to the evenings, you know, the second realization that that's my choice and I'm choosing to be a victim.
Mhm.
And it's weird. Now you look back and you say, but of course, but it was like these sort of aha moments. And then I would say the spiritual, like I feel like the universe knew I was ready. Um, so my last job on Wall Street, I was working for an investment group within Citicorp, Citibank. And right before we started to record, I talked about how it was like we were sitting because we had confidential information. So we were on a larger trading floor, but I was in a room with no sunlight, no windows, at a happy light. I had a heater under my desk because it was freezing. The head of the group sat behind me and would constantly tell me to turn the heater off. We would have Monday morning meeting. We would have morning meetings where nobody would look at each other, like everybody was back to each other. And I took a day for like a day long meditation retreat in Manhattan. And I journaled on the train going in the next day. I'm going to see if I can change this environment. I'm going to call my boss into his office. I'm going to talk about some changes. Maybe we look at each other during the morning meeting. Um, and Heather, the next day, my boss actually called me into his office to say, there's a company-wide restructuring. We're letting 10% of the people go, gave me a very good severance package. And and I never look back, and I will say that I really felt like the universe said to me, "You're no longer choosing to be a victim. You're choosing to take control." I'm going to tear up, and now you're ready for the next stage. And I do also remember a day or two later, I was still in my big house and I slipped down the back staircase and started to bawl uncontrollably. And my husband's, who I often laugh, he's an academic psychiatrist. He works, doesn't see individual patients, so he's not that great. He's like, "Why are you crying? This is what you wanted." And I said, this was my identity for 30 years. Like, I don't
Yeah.
know who I am. So, yes, this is what I wanted. And yes, I'm terrified.
Yeah.
So,
I
I,
remember when you and I first met, that was like something that stuck with me with you was you had this like beautiful life and this big house and you traveled and you had to make the decision to like again change your life and change your priorities and downsize your house or move and like sometimes like and it's so funny because we're always like most of us are striving to be where you were, right? Like we all want the big house. We want to travel on these like but like for you now you're basically switching roles and like changing your life and making it more simple. And talk about that transition for you.
it wasn't an easy transition. For anyone listening who's going through one of their own, I remember conversations with my husband. We've both come a long way, but when I first started talk about that I was unhappy and wanted to leave, so before I even made the change, my husband was adamant that you're the primary breadwinner. You agreed to be the primary breadwinner. You can't change. And I think money stories are so important. As I shared a little bit earlier, I took home from my father, whether he meant that to be the message that you don't do anything that makes you unhappy. You constantly strive to find what makes you happy. My father's parents were older than my parents, were sort of children of the Depression, though they were children during the Depression. They saw the impact it had. And my husband's father, I think he's karmically now the academic his father wanted to be. But when his father started, had a family, he left to sell insurance. And so the message my husband got was, you take care of your family. That's your primary responsibility. So when I started to make noises about not wanting to continue on Wall Street, my husband was really angry. You're the primary breadwinner. That was your agreement. I said, I don't remember signing a contract. I liked what I did. I don't like it anymore. And so there were a couple of years there. We went into therapy. There was a lot of anger, and we've come through it. I will say I'm privileged to have had the kind of earnings power I did for a lot of my career, so that we did have savings. And I also say, by the time I left, my kids were off the payroll, which is a big deal, right? I had paid for college, and I was responsible just for two people now instead of five, which makes a big difference. So I was in the privileged position of making the change. And like I said, I was a financial planner for myself. Like I can't,
Mm.
the overhead of this house, we didn't have a big mortgage, but I had a 6,000 square foot house, like heating that house and having the gardener come and cut the grass. I mean, I just said, I can't have that overhead anymore. And the vacation home, the same thing, I don't want to be paying taxes on two homes. And so just sort of looked at the spreadsheet and at the beginning, not only when you start a business, not only are you not necessarily earning money, you're spending money at the beginning, paying for software and other things that you need. And I was really sort of prepared to be poor, if you will. And I'm pleasantly surprised to recognize that we're not.
We were talking about your beautiful back. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see your beautiful backyard. And I'm like, oh, it just looks so beautiful. And you're like, this is like my happy place now, right? This is where you feel yourself.
Friends, I have such an exciting product that I need to share with you. Are you someone who hates washing their face at night? Yep, that's me. For years, I never wanted to wash my face. And finally, I found a product that actually gets me excited to wash my face every night, and that is Clear Stem. I have tried so many products over the years to find the one that I truly love, the one that makes my skin glow, the one that makes me feel good when I wash it, and the one that gets me excited to want to wash my face. I discovered Clear Stem through another podcaster, and I was like, I got to give this a try. I instantly became obsessed. Some of my favorite products are the hydrating cleanser, which I use every night. It smells delicious. It makes my skin feel so great. Once a week, I use their Vita Scrub, which is an exfoliating cleanser, and that just has these little micro beads in it that just make your face feel so beautiful. I can just feel them get into my pores and really give my face this huge glow. And then one of my other favorite products is the Hydra Berry mask. And once you wash your face, you put a layer of this on your skin and you go to sleep and you wake up and your face feels like butter. I get so many compliments on my skin now. I don't get a lot of breakouts anymore. My face feels nice and hydrated and bright, and it's all because of the Clear Stem product. What I love about them is that their products are all clean. They're good for your skin, they're good for your body, and they have so many different product lines based on the type of skin you have. So go down in the show notes, click on the link. I'm giving 15% off to anybody who uses my code, and I promise you, once you try this, you are going to be obsessed just as much I am. So again, go down to the show notes, click on the link, receive 15% off, and give Clear Stem a try. I promise you will not regret it.
Oh, it's so interesting. I've been working. I was thinking about this after our conversation of how long I've been working. Like even I started working when I was like 15. I always had two jobs. I always had three jobs. I've always had that hustle mentality, and I loved working. And even when I had kids, I was still constantly doing that. And now I'm at a time where I'm like, I don't want to work so hard. And I want to do meaningful work. I want to change people's lives. I want to inspire and I want to empower and I want to feel great about the work that I do every single day. What has that been like for you? And what is the work that you're doing? And who are the people that you get to serve now?
That's a great question. Thanks. I'm going to start, and perhaps, we've talked about this. I am always a bit of a seeker. And I think it's very hard as an entrepreneur to find the right balance, right? When I first started this business, I look back and say I was one of the worst bosses I ever had. I was still getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning and working, all day and every networking event and just really hustling to build it. And learning to let go, to do exactly what you just articulated, I think is the rest of my life's work. There's certainly cultural messaging that, everybody's proud of how busy they are. I'm so busy, I've got so much to do, and to let that go and it is work.
Hmm.
I I named my business True Abundance Advisors because I believe, as I said, when we talked about people on Wall Street and how they were just striving for more and more and more and more, that I think true abundance has us maximizing all our scarce resources. Of course, money is a scarce resource, but so is time and so is energy. And we're always trading one off for the other. And I think it's important to recognize the trade-offs we're making, right? And for my career, most of the time I was trading my life energy for money. And there's a time in your life when that's appropriate, right? You first start out, you want to build a base. I mean, that's what we need to do. But we don't want to keep doing that.
Mhm.
And so that's why I named the firm True Abundance. I work primarily with women who, similar to the women I interview for my podcast, who Generally, when you call a stranger to talk about your money, there's something coming up. It isn't like you wake up one day and say, "Oh, I'm going to call someone I don't know and tell them how much money I earn and how much I save." So there's generally something going on, like, I hate my job. Can I walk away? Or what's the minimum I need to earn? Or when can I retire? Or I'm getting divorced. How much do I need to? There's some sort of transition that's taking place. And it's interesting. I really love working with women, having been on training desks with dudes in my previous life. And I've come to recognize, and this was brought home to me by a woman who I've now been working with for many years. But when she first contacted me, she had gotten divorced. And she contacted me, and we didn't speak again for another year. And she said, Laura, I didn't respect myself enough to
Mm.
pay your fee because I do charge money for my services. And I find, as much as I love working with women, I do work with a lot of couples. And I think part of it is that the men are like, oh, that's what this costs. I'm going to pay for it. And, as a generalization, women tend to have a lot of difficulty spending on themselves.
For sure.
So, I know with the women I speak to who, give me a call, that's like, how much do you cost? Like, there's a lot of fear and anxiety around money. So it's sort of a double-edged sword of loving to work with women and getting women to actually pay for a service that they need is not always that easy. And I have to say, as someone who worked mostly with institutions in the past, it's tremendously satisfying work. Like I said earlier about Wall Street, people can feel like, oh, but I've got no real skill set. And honestly, I didn't say this to people when they started to work with me. I have a deep comfort with numbers. I understand financial markets, but what I do now bears very little resemblance to what I used to do, other than broadly how I see it as the stories are the most interesting part and the numbers are sort of the scaffolding for the life of the story. And I think that was true when I was analyzing companies. But in terms of the detailed work, whether it's understanding what's adequate insurance, whether it's understanding how to be most efficient with taxes, the kind of things I do work on, that had nothing to do with what I used to do before. And this is so gratifying that even friends will call and ask me questions. And it's nice to feel like I have a skill that actually benefits people.
I mean,
So,
I'm like, where do I sign up? And especially as you own a business too, the tax side of it is so scary, it's so daunting. And I feel like we're just spending all this money on taxes. I'm like, there's got to be a better way, right? And so I can appreciate people who are doing the work that you're doing because we need help. And again, especially as somebody who's not in the finance, like that's not a like strong suit for me. It's scary. It's interesting. I do women's retreats, and our last women's retreat, we actually had someone come on and talk about money. Like we always try and talk about money, and we've had different speakers on different things. But she was talking about how we all have different money mindsets, and it usually stems from our childhood or how we were raised. Do you find yourself working with women a lot to like change that, or help them see things in a different light? Or, I mean, I'm assuming you probably experienced that a lot.
I think the money stories, as I said and talked about the difference between myself and my husband, for example, I think the money stories are fascinating.
Yeah.
And one thing you recognize is that people's financial resources have very little correlation to how people feel about their money. I mean, one of the first stories I had before I had an office and was going to people's homes when I first started to work. So the first home I went into, I still remember this, it was gorgeous. Like I walked in, it was a large home with a large, like, baby grand piano and floor to ceiling windows looking out over their pool. And then we started to talk about their money, and the husband was already retired and collecting Social Security. They did not have a lot of money, and they had kids that were about to go to college, and they were going to not deny their kid. If the kid got into Harvard, they were going to Harvard. Like they didn't care about. And I literally said to them, "Are you expecting a big inheritance? Are you
Yeah.
buying lottery tickets? Like, what's up?" And that very same day, Heather, I walked into the home of a widow. It was a row house. Uh, so she was like connected to other houses. She was wearing a lovely polyester pantsuit, and like her big night out was going to church and playing bingo. She had, I remember, a little glass menagerie collection. She was worth millions, millions. So the way people spend
Mhm.
and the amount of money they have, very little correlation. Relationship to money in terms of fear, or very little correlation. How you were raised and the stories you were raised with, that's really the impact you have. And then I have to share, I'm someone I love working with archetypes. So I am interested in astrology. Right now I'm studying the Enneagram and the connection between Enneagram types and
Mhm.
money. I just find it fascinating. And I often, when I first start to work with someone, I do ask their money stories. I have more, I just recently did, or I'm still in a mentorship for what's called financial life planning, where I am more asking clients questions that make them aware that life is not endless.
Mhm.
And so has them really think about what's important to them and how, if they had all the money they needed, what would they change in their lives? If they knew they had 5 years left to live, what would they change? And if they heard they had 24 hours left to live, who would they regret not being and what would they regret not doing? And that's been very, very powerful work for me, because I've learned to be silent and just read the answers back and listen. And just asking these questions has led my clients to have conversations with other family members to just be less defensive about, like, just tell me how to make as much money as I can. And to really think about, what is your money for?
Mhm.
Um, and who would you like to be? So that to me has become just as powerful as like looking at the past, because money stories, to a certain extent, like, it's important to understand, especially when you and a spouse have a very different money story. I
Mhm.
think it's important to recognize that. And I'm really enjoying this idea of seeding ideas for the future.
Mhm.
Okay, this is who you've been. What would you change?
Mhm. So good. One thought that I just had is I actually just had this conversation with a friend of mine. Here in Sonoma County, it is very expensive to live. We literally live paycheck to paycheck. Some of us have second jobs just to support, just to just live, not even to go on vacations or do these things. And I had a friend who she's like, I don't even have money saved up in, like, I don't have a retirement because she is, entrepreneur, owns her own business. Is it too late to save money for your retirement? And how do you, I mean, again, this is a loaded question, but like, I guess for me, and I want to assure her that it's not too late to start investing money for your future.
So, a couple of things come up in response to that question. First of all, I always recommend having 3 to 6 months of money just in an emergency fund, 3 to 6 months of money needs, so that when you blow the tires on your car, you're not suddenly drawing down on your 25% interest rate credit card bill. So, I would say first priority is just having savings in a bank account. Nowadays, you could actually earn a decent amount of money on your bank account. So that's number one. Number two, repaying that credit card debt. So if you've got some credit card debt, it's often yielding 20%, 25%. That's like an automatic investment return every time you start to pay that down. So I would say that's another priority. That being said, even if you have credit card debt, you could put away $5 a month just to, that momentum towards making a change in one's life. And I also want to say that we go through different stages in our lives. Like, I have a client who just had a newborn baby. It's her second child. Um, and daycare is so expensive. And I said, this is going to be one of the most expensive periods of your life. Don't beat up on yourself if you feel like everything that comes in each month goes out each month. This is not the time in your life to feel like you're supposed to be generating so much additional cash. So again, I don't know how old your friend is. I don't know what time of life they're in, but there will come a time where there should be more money flow. What's most important as I'm again looking at different archetypes, we can put ourselves in sort of broadly, are you money avoidant? Are you a money worshiper? Do you see money as status? And the worst thing to be, I'd have to say, is money avoidant,
Mm.
right? Even if it's painful, get yourself a glass of wine first, but don't avoid looking at. And it sounds like your friend isn't avoiding it. Like, well, this is what's coming in and this is what's going out, and I'm aware. I mean, I just started to work with a woman who one of the first things I do is make sure they have a system set up for tracking. And nowadays, it's so easy to set these systems up where you link accounts and you use AI and everything's categorized. And she's like, shit, I gave my daughter access to these dating apps, and she didn't realize, like I said, oh, I'm going to pay for your dating app. I want you to, and she didn't realize that, like, it's recurring. Like, she thought she paid once and she's done it. And it's like every month she's getting hit with a $30 charge until she actually linked her account.
Oh.
It's Tiller, but there are several like this. She didn't realize she was spending that money.
Mm.
She had no idea because so many of us, even if we're not like avoidant, and I have a family member who is avoidant, can't even manage to link their account to an app. It's like all you have to do is won't do it and won't, every time I ask, like changes the subject. But, even if you're not avoidant like that, even if you're just like, who the hell has the time? Well, make the time.
I literally know every single penny that goes in and out from any of my personal account, my husband's account, my business accounts. I know every penny. Well, nothing gets by me.
I actually use this app, the one I'm recommending, though there's two that I recommend, Monarch Money. I use something called Tiller. You can use it in a Google Doc or you can use it in an Excel spreadsheet, whichever you're comfortable with. And every single day, I get an email from them that shows me all my transactions and all my balances, both in my bank accounts and my credit card accounts. So I can't avoid it. And I make an effort to be grateful because one could sort of look at that email and go, I don't want to open it. Or like, oh my God, I spent that much money. Um, and so it really is my practice to like put my hand on my heart and say, how lucky am I that I have this money in the bank and that I have this money to spend? Because at the end of the day, money should be in flow.
Mhm.
Right? It shouldn't be if you're like a money miser because of the stories you grew up with of scarcity, and so many of us do have that scarcity mindset. We just want it, we're like squirrels with acorns in our cheeks. We want more, we want it all to be in the bank. And that's not, money is meant to be spent
Yeah.
and to keep the economy going.
So good. What is, from doing all this work, what is like the number one advice that you could give somebody who, I would say probably the number one advice that you've given to your clients over the years that you would love to pour into the audience today?
Well, I do. It's interesting how everybody has different circumstances. So I hear myself saying, and I might have shared this anecdote with you. Someone from my neighborhood reached out to me. They had just gotten a little bit of money. It was really quite a small amount, but they wanted to know, like, how should they invest it? And so I said to them, on average, I expect my investment accounts to earn, let's say 7% on average over time. And so this woman had $10,000 and she said, oh, so my $10,000 can become $70,000? And I said, no, 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 that's 700%. That's not 7%. So she said, and it was a reasonable question. Well, so how do people build wealth? And so back to our conversation from a couple of minutes ago, Heather said, you make sure that you earn more than you spend and you find some money to invest because the power of compounding, especially when you're young, is astronomical. So if you start, it feels ridiculous to put $5 a month, but it's $5 a month. And whether that's 4% in a bank account or 7% on average in, a diversified low fee portfolio, you're going to turn around that $5 a month in 10 years. You're going to be surprised at how much that's worth.
Mm.
And so it's a certain amount of discipline that I recommend you have. And that gets back to what we just said, which is don't avoid looking at your money.
Mhm.
Gamify it somehow, something to actually look at what's coming in and what's going out and be a master of your money.
So good. Do you find a lot of women who have kids spend an obscene amount of money on their children, talk about their like Lululemon clothes or getting their nails done, and but they won't spend a single dime on a retreat or a new pair of shoes for them? Do you see that often? Because I definitely know in my world, I see it very, very often.
Yeah, like I said earlier, when potentially meeting with women to become clients, they will spend money on their kids, they will spend money on their family, but to spend money on something that they think is for themselves, it's much, much harder. I would say also it's not necessarily only women. I think in general, culturally, and it's a beautiful thing. We feel like we don't want to deny our children um, and that our children, I mean, I'm working with a couple. They recently got divorced. I was working with both of them, and now I'm just working with the woman. And I guess I'll share, this is a New York city suburb thing. Perhaps it's the same where you live, Heather. But I invested in this software for colleges, like which colleges have merit scholarships, if because the people I work with often aren't going to qualify for need-based. So it was an expensive database and different scholarships they could apply for. It didn't matter if their kid, what the best school that their kid got into, if the kid wants to go, 90,000 a year, room and board, they don't care if they'll have to draw from their retirement account. I mean, luckily I didn't have any work with anyone that got to that point, but I realized, why am I investing in that software? They don't care. They're going to send their kid to the college their kid wants to go to, that's just the culture that I live in. I'm sure there are people that'll say, I actually tried to do it with my son. There's a very good New York State school. I knew even when I said it that it was a joke. I said, if you apply to this school and get in, I'll buy you a Mercedes. And he didn't apply to it. He went to University of Michigan, out-of-state student, had a great time. I don't regret it, but I'm part of that culture that like you don't deny your kids, which is different, than my money avoidant child who's now in their early 30s. And
Mm.
that really is work to say, I can't solve this for them. They need to earn more money. They need to spend less money. I'm happy to be a resource. Out of my three kids, they're the ones most economically challenged and least likely to ask me for any financial advice. Um, Par for the course. So, it's hard. It's hard as a parent to not want to deny.
Hmm. I feel like that's like a whole conversation in itself about college and why we spend money and why we shouldn't spend so much money, and they could go to a JC and now they could learn online, and like I feel like that's like a whole thing. So
Totally.
I didn't even think about the school thing. You have a book. What is your book called and what
I
is
do not have a book. I
you're
have a
writing a
podcast.
book? No,
No,
you
everybody in
told
my
me to read a
neighborhood.
book. I have a book. Die with Zero. You must have told me
Yes,
to
yes,
read it.
not my book.
Yeah.
Not my book, but
Yeah.
as I've said to a lot of both my clients and other people I've met, the title says most of it, and obviously it's speaking to a certain population. But in my field, there's something called the Monte Carlo simulation, where you put all the numbers in. This is what you're spending, Heather. We're going to inflate it. And this is what you're earning. We'll inflate that too. And we'll project out what you need for college and what you're so blah, blah, blah. And at the end of the day, it's like, okay, you're going to live till 95. What's the probability that your money will last till age 95? And it's called the probability of success. And everybody wants to see something close to 100. I have to say, I'm similar. And Die with Zero will say, if you've got 100% probability of success, you are dying with way too much money. You're denying yourself trips. You're not giving as much money as you might give to charity. You're not helping their kids when they need it now, maybe a down payment on a house rather than leaving them a legacy. That your probability of success should probably be 80%, if not lower, because anything that high is just overcompensating. And I'd have to say, I agree. On the one hand, one of the hard parts about being a financial advisor is like, who the hell knows? Like you use these numbers, but you don't know what's going to happen in the world. On the other hand, I mean, speaking for myself, I'm inflating my expenses out till age 95. I watch my parents. They slowed down way before age 95. They weren't even around way before age 95. So, to the extent that we try to build in all these buffers as a financial advisor, you're almost guaranteeing that people will die with way more than zero. So it's a concept of just back to the squirrel and the acorns in the cheeks of just recognizing the balance. Obviously, Die with Zero is, what my child is trying to do, and so far they're going to be very successful. So it's not written to that population. It's written to a population of people that does and have accumulated financial resources and are afraid to spend.
So good. I'll have to read it. But you're gonna write a book someday. I know it. You haven't even said it, but I know it. How can my listeners find you? How can they listen to you talked about a little bit about your podcast. How can they connect with you?
Great. Thank you for asking. So, my website is trueabundanceadvisors.com, and I have a link there either to just subscribe to my newsletter. I do blend a little bit of mindfulness teachings in my newsletter. So, I send that out once a week. Or if you're interested in having a conversation, I certainly, like most service providers, first connect with someone without charging just to get a sense of who you are. So that calendar link is on my website as well. And my podcast is Making Change with Your Money, where I've been privileged to meet so many wonderful women like yourself. And I feel so privileged to be in the position to have these kind of conversations, Heather, rather than just sitting in a windowless space,
Yeah. Oh my God.
surrounded by people whose values I don't share. So this is continues to be a sort of very creative period of life for me, and I just love meeting new people.
I love it. Well, thank you for the work you're doing. I'm so glad that we got connected. Thank you for being on my podcast. I'll be going on yours as well in the future. And again, I'm just so honored to have you here. So thanks for being here.
Thank you.